What's going on, everybody? I'm Jim with Atheist Edge. Today we've got a little panel of an eclectic panel, and I'm going to just start off with Ross Frailey, and go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Ross Frailey. I have a bachelor's of science degree in psychology. I did 6 years active duty Air Force. Um, I'm a big fan of Matt Dillahunty and Lawrence Krauss, Tyson, all kinds of different people. I've got a minor in philosophy, so this is my bread and butter. I enjoy conversations with anybody and everybody. So the more criticism, the better.
Awesome.
I agree with Matt Dillahunty. I want to accept as many true assertions as possible and as many reject as many false claims as possible.
Right. Suris the Skeptic.
Sure thing. My name is Suris. I have a YouTube channel where I upload daily content on the off chance that I actually can upload daily content. Sometimes I fail at that. Professionalism, everybody. Anyway, I have a series called Dangers of Woo where I tackle pseudoscience and anything that is deemed harmful but people for some reason think is good, like drinking their own urine. I also have a series called L-Hack where I talk about philosophy, and then I do video responses as well, because if I didn't do video responses, then my skeptic card would be revoked. I think that's the law of the internet.
1 second. Technical difficult, of course. Okay, and Pastor Wilson.
Yes, I'm Bishop and Pastor Ramon Wilson with the True Body of Christ Restored.com. And our mission is to show people how Satan is corrupting everyone except for our online church. And I'm just here to have the conversation, and I like great conversations like this.
Awesome. What do we got? The only thing I wanted to get out there is I just today at around noon, I put the finishing touches on a 3-month project. It's taken 3 months, 60 hours of editing. Celebrity, I'm not going to tell you who, but we got a celebrity narrator. We even hired a professional illustrator. And that video, it's only 11 minutes long, and it took 3 months to make. And I'm a little bit proud of it. It's going to be out Sunday afternoon, this Sunday afternoon. So be looking for that. And I'm not going to say any more about it. Just be looking for it. Let's get right into it. Today's topic is why theism fails. Pastor Wilson is our token theist, but the rest of us are going to do our best to put on our Christian hats and think of it from not devil's advocate. I guess it would be God's advocate point of view. But we're going to bounce some questions, ideas, and bounce some things off of you as you go through your topic, Ross. So the floor is yours.
All right. Let's start with the proposition. I hope that we can all agree that if theism is irrational, then it fails.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, cool. So that's how we're going to determine whether this fails or whether it passes. My position, of course, is that it's irrational. I have so many different things that I can go off of.
At that point, I have to ask the first question.
What's the distinction?
So irrational. Can you define irrational?
Right. Irrational, I think the bare bones of irrational that we can start with is 50-50. Anything above 51% chance that there's a God that exists, that's rational.
So even if there was we're dealing with probabilism then, correct?
Correct.
Because this is okay. So we're dealing with probabilism. You will only accept something as rational if it dips into the 51% likely category, correct?
For this topic, I'm sure other things you would consider maybe some forms of gambling and stuff. You might consider a move if you only have 25% chance of it being successful. You might consider it rational. As far as ontology, existence of things, I would think the 50% marker would be a bare minimum.
I'm going to let you continue to let you make the point. I'm going to withhold comment for that time.
That's fine. We can.
So if you're, let me think. Let me ask this: if you're 51% certain on something, you would call that rational. Is that what we're talking about?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Hit it.
All right. So for me, all of theism comes down to 6 words I think defeats it. And that's the fallacy of putting the cart before the horse. Or putting the
Presuppositionalism?
Yes. I think theism comes down to, if you're a theist, you have to be a presupposition.
Can you... Okay, so I already have a point of contention.
My question for theists is, how do you get to God without assuming that there's a God?
Pastor Wilson.
Yeah.
I got a feeling you're chomping at the bit to get in here.
Right.
Well, yeah, but I can do it from your end.
Okay.
How do you get to the point of believing there isn't one? With everything that exists and the complexity of the universe and every single individual, that whole premise falls out the window when you just think about how complex the world is.
An argument from complexity is going to be very, very fallacious. I wouldn't step into that territory. So
that's an incredulity argument,
yes,
right?
So,
simply because you can't think of a different explanation that pins both. I think you do have the right that it pins both of you in awkward spots. Because for one, let's assume we have, for t equals 0, why t equals 0 started, we have a blank slate. We don't know.
Tell everyone what t equals 0 means, Chris.
T equals 0 is the point of beginning for the universe. It's when time actually begins. Time is a measurement of change. T equals 0 would be the ability to measure the first change. Mathematically, we've been able to calculate out a lot that has gone on up until the point of t equals 0, but we have not quite gotten to the point where we've been able to figure out the first cause of t equals 0. So I have a point of contention for the pastor, and I have a point of contention for you. My point of contention for the pastor is an argument from incredulity is itself fallacious. So simply because things are complex and you can't see another way doesn't mean another way doesn't exist, which is why I wouldn't go into that territory.
That doesn't mean it does.
And it doesn't.
The same point.
And
it
does
more than 50. If I told you that the world was created by nothing on its own, and I told you that it was created by a complicated God, I would have the 51% more than you would.
Not necessarily, no, because you'd still have to demonstrate that, and you don't have the ability to demonstrate that.
You would have that same problem.
But we don't say that it came from nothing.
And you can tu quoque if you'd like, but that is also a fallacy.
The whole premise is a fallacy. The premise that you have is a fallacy, and the premise that I have is a fallacy. There's no concrete period.
Okay.
Pastor Wilson, you might be under the impression that we think that the universe came from when did the universe come into existence? The farthest back we can go is t equals 0, the singularity, and the singularity is something. To say it to talk about before t equals 0, that's illogical in itself, because time and space.
But t equals 0 is just a guess. It's not a fact.
It actually is a fact. We actually have math that pulls us back there.
There is
point of singularity is a mathematical fact.
But sir, you're talking about.
I'm pretty sure it's a theory, but okay, I'll look it up.
Hold on. Whoa. Okay, cool. Sure. We've already done the first problem. Do you know what a theory is? Could you please define theory for me?
I think. Hold on, just real quick. I think Ross wants to jump in.
Sure.
Sorry.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's Suris?
Yes.
I believe you're talking about, when you say universe, you're using it scientifically to mean the observable cosmos. Is that correct?
No. I'm not using the word cosmos. Okay. Cosmos is the umbrella term in science that Carl Sagan coined in order to be the umbrella term that the universe resides in. There can be things outside of our universe within the cosmos. Those are two completely different concepts. One is an umbrella term, and the other one is our local area. Our local area would be the universe. The cosmos would be everything outside of that as well. if there is anything there. There's an entire study into dark flow that shows that there's a possibility of that.
No shit. I thought they were synonyms.
No, they're not.
Huh. Now I'm glad that you clarified that, because I used them the exact opposite way.
So not the scientific way.
I used universe the philosophical way, as in that which exists.
As in everything. So Spinoza's way of defining the universe.
Correct. Okay. So universe would mean everything that exists. It would be broader than cosmos. So
okay.
I don't care which way we use it, but we just
as long as we can accept that we're using them in those particular ways. Okay. If you refer to universe, I will understand that you're referring to what I understand as the cosmos. If I say universe, then you understand that okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. That said, the first point I was going to say, the point, I did have a point for you as well. I had a point for the pastor and a point for you.
Okay.
The point for you is presuppositionalism within philosophy is one. It's one umbrella term that has multiple subsects of studies under it. You've got your Seitan Bruggenkate style of theist who come from presuppositionalism. We also call those jokes. But Seitan's style is still under the umbrella of presup. Presup, however, is only one form of reasoning that is used to posit a god. There is still deductive reasonings that can get you to the idea. There's still Kalam, which even though the Kalam theory, it's completely hinging on a theory of time, but if you accept a theory of time, Kalam at least gets you to a deity of some kind. It's not necessarily a particular kind of deity, but it gets you to one. But even that's not a presuppositional argument. Saying that all theistic arguments are presuppositional, I think that's I don't know if you're intending on strawmanning that side, but that sounds like one to me.
I have no intention of strawmanning. How about what I have is essentially 11 arguments that are individual, but I've put them into one argument.
Okay.
You know what? Right now, why don't we just sit back and let you just hammer out all 11, and then we'll pick out afterwards. Pick out.
Yeah. Before he does that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
I want other guy to go back and say that the theory that he said wasn't a theory.
Definition of a theory, Chris.
Well, I was asking what the definition of theory that he was using was first.
No, I'm
the colloquial or the scientific.
What term are you using to define that it's a fallacy, or what concept are you using right now?
I think Suris thought that maybe you were using it in a colloquial sense instead of a scientific.
Yeah, and I didn't say fallacy for that. I didn't say when I use the term fallacy, I'm referring to a specific fallacy. I wasn't saying that your use of the term theory is fallacy, because technically it's etymological, but
what were you saying wasn't a theory and was actually fact? That's my question.
No. There's my first point of contention. That's why I want your definition of theory first. Very quickly, what is your definition of theory? How are you using that word?
Something that can't actually be proved.
Okay.
Theories can't be. Most theories can't.
Mathematical theories can be proved. That's actually how math works. First of all, secondly,
you have to wait. Every mathematical equation is a theory.
Yes, and they can.
It's not. Stop. It's not a fact. It's a fact because
it's a brute fact. It's an axiom. That's how math works.
Wait. I'm explaining to you where you're getting it wrong. The reason why
that's what I was doing.
The reason why we hold 2 times 2 is 4 is because we accept that premise. Since we didn't actually create understanding or math or whatever the case may be, we don't actually know what God or whoever else, what the number actually is. Just because we accept something to be true doesn't mean that it's true. Like when we accepted that Pluto was a planet and then it wasn't.
Those are two completely different things. First of all, the Pluto's a planet thing comes down to definitions. That's its own thing.
That's a theory.
No, it's not. That's not how that is not how that works. Hold on. A theory in science is an explanation of a body of facts. It is the best explanation currently posited for a body of facts, and it has the ability to evolve over
everything
time.
you just said isn't a fact. It's a theory.
I think we're okay. So
we have begun,
guys.
Fire.
Well, I think here's where we're getting wrapped around the axle on. There's two definitions of theory. The colloquial is just your best guess. It can't be proven or what all the. I have a theory of where I left my car keys. I can't find them. I got a theory of where they might be. That's the colloquial sense. A theory in scientific terms, now this is outside of mathematics and can be argued law also, is the only two provable fields. But anywhere else in science, theories are as far as you can go. It's as high as you can go in science. It's a mountain, usually, of facts, like in the case of gravity or atomic theory or germ theory of disease or even evolutionary theory. It's all the facts combined. And the difference between 2 times 2 equals 4 and Pluto's the planet, or maybe it's not. Well, the former can be tested. It can.
Wait. So before people could go, so let's say that you can only go to this far on a road, and you weren't able to go past that point on the road. According to you, the world ends right there.
No, that is a giant straw man. Yeah. There's nothing that it's not. Nothing that he said says that. Nothing Jim just said gets you what you just said.
That is exactly what he just said.
No, it's not.
The only reason it falls apart is because atheists have to stop before God.
No, they don't.
Okay.
I'm willing to accept. I have an entire argument that accepts a deity and still gets you to atheism. If you'd like to hear it sometime.
This is a whole separate episode. Let's go ahead and right now let Ross just. Yeah, Ross, just hit the wave tops on your 11 points, and then afterwards we'll dig into one of them. We've only got like an hour left at the most, and every minute is precious, and we want to give you your chance. So go hit it.
My name's Ross Frailey. Let's see if we agree. On that.
Okay, we've agreed on. I accept the premise that you are Ross Frailey.
No. On this. If for there to be a daughter of Ross Frailey, then there must necessarily be a Ross Frailey.
Yes, argument from Contingency would entail that.
Awesome.
Okay, cool.
On that, if the pastor also agrees with us on that, then my 11 arguments are solid.
We'll have to hear them first.
Premise 1, for there to be a word or inspired word of a God, then there must necessarily be a God.
Okay.
Pretty basic, right?
Mm-hmm. Waiting for the complicated parts. I'm also taking notes.
Yeah.
My premise 2, not very strong philosophically probably, there is no God, and in parentheses, that we know of as of yet. So it's a modus tollens argument. It's valid deductively. The premise 2 denies the consequent. Denying the consequent denies the I'm blanking on basic philosophy.
That's all right, man. This is your first show. We'll give you a pass. Move on. Just hit all your points.
So that's the first argument. For there to be a word or inspired word of God, then there must necessarily be a God. Premise 2 basically is there is no God, therefore there is no word or inspired word of a God.
So is this okay, so you said this was 11 points.
Yep. That's argument 1. Argument 2.
Okay, so that's your first syllogism.
Correct.
Okay. And can you repeat that conclusion one more time?
The conclusion would be the denial of the first part of premise 1. It would be there is no word or inspired word of a God.
Okay. All right, then let's hear argument 2.
Argument 2. For there to be a son of a God, then there first must necessarily be a God.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Premise 2 for this argument is the same as premise 2 in the last argument. Conclusion still follows. There is no son of a god, just like in argument 1. So we're just changing out word or inspired word of a god for son of a god.
Okay, then what's the next argument?
Same thing. Premise 1, though, is for there to be prophets of a god, then there must necessarily be a god.
Unless the prophets are diluted.
Well, then they would just be prophets, not prophets of a god.
Okay, gotcha.
Of a god,
Yeah.
correct.
Okay.
Number 4, if you guys are ready.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this, I admit, might be incorrect for theists, so don't take this as a straw man. This is my understanding. For there to be sin, sin defined as transgressions against a god. If you don't accept that definition of sin, this would not apply.
Yeah, sin is whatever is a transgression or offensive towards a god. I'm willing to accept that definition for this.
Mm-hmm.
Same. But I have no intention of trying to straw man a theist that would claim something else.
And the premise to that one is, of course,
Same.
there is no God because we don't have evidence of sin, right, or something like that.
Well, it would just premise 2 would just be there is no God that we know of as of yet.
Okay. Now the next argument.
Again, it depends on how you define the term, but the premise is for there to be divinity, then there must necessarily be a God.
We accept the definition of divinity as that which is godly. Does that work for
Correct.
this? Okay.
Okay.
6, same thing. For there to be a spirit or ghost of a god, then there must necessarily be a god.
All right.
Number 7, I branch out from just God to human. For 7, I have for there to be spirits from a god. Often it's claimed that humans have spirits.
Oh, soul.
Argument.
Like a soul.
Correct. That's number 8. Number 8
Okay.
is for there to be souls from a god. Then there must
Specifically
necessarily
souls
be
from a god, correct?
Correct.
Okay, because there are other models that have a soul that don't include a god.
Correct.
All right.
For there to be blessings from a god,
That's
then there must
9.
necessarily be a god.
Okay, and 10?
10, for there to be an afterlife determined by God, then there must necessarily be a God.
Okay, and then 11.
11 is a combo hit. For there to be creation, design, or fine-tuning, there must be a creator, a designer, or a fine-tuner.
Okay, and is that it?
Those are the 11. 11 is a combined 3-part argument if you want.
Okay.
What I do is I number them 1 through 11. 12 is my premise 2 for all of them. And then the conclusion is just the denial of the first half of each premise.
It's got a nice little theme to it. Maybe we can tackle all this all in one shot.
From that, I conclude there is not much evidence for a God to exist.
You can conclude there's not much evidence, which is fair, but in each of these, your second premise, you've made an argument that a theist would have to put a cart before the horse in order to support their argument. But to get to your conclusion, you had to have your second premise, which would have been putting the cart before the horse as well. So I'm curious what mirror you're looking through.
I am curious how you consider premise 2 to be putting the cart before the horse when it's basic skepticism.
Well, first of all, you have to apply skepticism as an epistemology to make it function. Not everybody falls under skepticism as an epistemology, so it becomes contingent only on your epistemology functioning within those parameters. 2, the way that this looks like it should be worded is premise 1 through 11 without there is no God constantly tacked on. So that's the part where I have contention.
That's why I numbered them 1 through 11, and then premise 2 is number 12, which applies to all of them. I don't know if you can see my screen too well.
Scroll down to 12. I can only see up to 9. Okay, your premise 12 is just the premise 2 of every other one, though.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly.
And that's why I said that premise 2 isn't necessary for this. The way that hold on, let me screen share my notes so you can see why I was confused.
No problem.
Okay, so this is how I had been writing it down. If you can see,
yeah.
Eventually, I just gave up and was just like, nope, it's just numbered down.
Yeah, I did. Yep. I did the same thing.
Yeah, that's
correct.
Okay, so so again,
so by analogy, I would argue that I used to have a deer antler at my house. And if I still had it, I would hold it up and say that.
Are you going to do the breaking the horns argument?
No. I would claim that it's a unicorn horn.
Okay.
But in order for it to be a unicorn horn, there would have to be unicorns exist at some point.
Mm-hmm.
There might not exist now, as long as they existed in the past. It would be at least rational.
So, okay, I have a are you familiar with the argument for morality for God's existence? Bear in mind I'm an atheist. I'm not trying to have an agenda here. I'm just trying to make sure there's consistency. Okay.
Yes, I'm familiar with William Lane Craig, his argument, and it's the same modus tollens.
It's the exact same, yeah, it's the same structure as what you're using here. Do you accept his moral argument?
No.
Okay. Then
because I disagree with his premise 2. I agree with its premise 1. I actually I've been in discussions recently about objective and subjective morality. I lean towards Harris and what's his name? Stephen, I believe, from Rationality Rules.
Yeah, Stephen Woodford.
Correct.
I don't lean towards them. I'm a moral anti-realist, so I don't tend to lean towards Harris because I'm by definition on the opposite spectrum at that point.
Right.
I kind of flirted with error theory and moral nihilism a bit, but I still don't know where I sit on that. So I've just kind of just been agnostic on it. However,
that's topic, right?
Yeah, that's completely off the topic here. So I agree that there is no God that we know of, but the problem with your wording is you used the term no. And if we're talking about philosophy, you already know that that's an incredibly loaded term because there's a 10-hour long discussion on what it is to know something. So for sake of argument, let's just accept a pragmatic theory of knowledge. So are you familiar with the Venn diagram of knowledge? But the Venn diagram of knowledge and belief, rather.
Yes, I think I've seen memes of it and stuff, but I don't have it pulled up or anything like that.
Okay, so Venn diagram is belief is on one side, truth is on the other side, and where belief and truth intersect in the Venn diagram, that's where knowledge is. Right. If you believe something and it's true, then by fiat you know it. If you believe something and it's not true, then you believe it, but it doesn't make it true. And there can be things that are true that you don't believe that are just simply true.
It's the definition of justified true belief.
Okay. I think justified true belief is a bit different, but I'm not an expert on that. I actually have a friend who is. I can ask him later. Anyway, are you willing to accept that theory of truth tentatively for the time being?
Yes.
Okay. Then if somebody happened to believe in a God and claimed knowledge of it, most people who believe in a God claim knowledge of it. But if somebody were to believe in a God, let's say that our pastor here was correct, that his interpretation of God is correct. Let's grant him that for just a moment. One of the arguments that we would commonly use against him is that, well, you just believe that, you don't know it, which assumes that it's false from the get-go, because you can believe it. If you don't believe it and know it, then it must not be true under that theory of knowledge.
I would say that they're not even using belief. So, right,
Why?
we can get semantics of that.
That's a psychology argument.
Well, I have a bachelor's in psychology too, but because I make a distinction between faith and belief. I don't consider faith a belief.
How?
How does I don't see how that parses through.
I've heard that before, and I used to think the same way until Steve McRae set me straight. But okay, so I don't know if Ross is going down this road, but I used to think that the word belief had some really religious connotations, and it was tied directly to religious faith. That's why I stayed away from belief. I always said I accept. You know, I never said I know, K-N-O-W, and I never said I believed, because that was a religious context. So I would just say I accept this premise. That means usually implying that it's a tentative acceptance, because even the most skeptical among us have to, we have to have at least one presupposition, and that is that reality is real, and then we're not brain in a vat and matrix and all that. So we all have presuppositions.
Unless you're a skeptic solipsist.
Well, yeah.
I totally agree. I don't deny. I don't not use belief because of thinking it has religious connotations. I don't use it because of this problem, because it's so malleable, so plastic. So
the way that I use belief, though, it's not malleable. Belief is simply anything that you think is true, whether you claim knowledge on it or not. If you think it's true, even probabilistically, it would fall in the category of belief. Right. For me, but I'm also a pragmatist, so simple definitions work.
So why not just use acceptance?
Because at that point, you're just having a semantic argument.
Yeah, it's not true.
Yeah,
it's
belief. We talked to Steve McRae set me straight, and the more I talk to him, you know, precise language is necessary in these kind of situations. And my definition of belief is more in line with the way it's supposed to be used now.
Yeah, for me, I tend to use belief because that word has the connotations that I need it to for a theory of knowledge. The term acceptance does not have the correct and precise definitions for a precise theory of knowledge. And that's why specifically why I don't use it. And it's also why I hold contention with this argument the way it's presented, because it seems like it is in fact a cart before the horse argument, even though it's not intending to be, and it's using the same structure that something like William Lane Craig's moral argument is.
Correct.
But if you don't accept William Lane Craig's moral argument, then anybody could just not accept this on the same basis that you don't accept Craig's, because the structure is identical. All that matters is that an atheist doesn't agree with Craig's assertion that a God is the root for morality, and somebody on the theistic side can just not accept the premise that there is no God. There is no God fundamentally needs to be a conclusion, not a premise. If it's a premise, it can just be outright rejected.
Let me put a really let's put a bow on this real quick. Oh, go ahead.
Okay. The point of the 11 arguments, though, is to show that what we would consider evidence for God really isn't evidence, because you're putting the cart before the horse. So
you're doing the same thing.
Yeah, I do kind of have to agree with him there.
But do we all agree? I thought we started out with, if Ross Frailey does not exist, then the daughter of Ross Frailey could not exist.
But you haven't proved that God doesn't exist, so you're at the same point as us.
I think you kind of have to do that if that's the road you're going down.
The road you're going down there, and this is, and bear in mind, you have two atheists here who would love nothing more than to have a stronger argument for God in their toolkit, and both of us are looking at this and going, that doesn't pan out. And this is coming from I know that.
But why does it not pan out?
I've tried explaining that.
Wait, let's stop. How do you prove God? How do you prove 100% God doesn't exist?
When I don't think you can, as far as deism goes.
That's why it's a problem. You can't know it because you don't know it.
but theism makes claims that deism does not.
Theism is the umbrella term which deism falls under.
Yeah.
Correct.
Deism is a subset of theism.
So
Okay,
it would be that deism makes claims. It's theism to say theism makes claims that deism does not. If deism makes a claim, it is a claim from a position of theism.
okay,
I think it was Carl Sagan or maybe Christopher Hitchens. He said deism is just watered down theism, and pantheism is just sexed up atheism.
by deism, I mean a God that does not manifest in reality, whereas theism does make that claim.
No, theism makes the claim that a God exists. It doesn't have to manifest in reality. It doesn't have contingencies on what type of existence it is. Theism simply makes the claim that a God exists in some form or fashion, which is why deism falls under it.
Okay.
It has a burden of
fine.
proof. Yes.
Right. So if we go back to putting the cart before the horse, why does it not make sense that my daughter cannot exist without me ever existing, but it's a problem when the Son of God?
Because you're arguing from infinite regress. That's why it becomes a problem.
How?
Because if you say you don't exist, we can prove that you didn't exist. If you say God doesn't exist, you can't prove that.
No, it's basic cause and effect, and what relies on something else.
So here's why it's a problem of infinite regress. The problems are identical. For your daughter to exist, you must have existed at some point. For you to exist, your father must have existed at some point. For him to exist, his mother must have existed at some point. And you go all the way down the causal chain until you get to t equals 0. You'll go all the way down the causal chain until you hit the first event that ever happened.
Exactly.
If there was one.
Well,
math and me agree that something happened. Anyway,
more fields than just mathematics.
I tend to agree with I totally agree with the beginning of, you would say, our universe. I would say our observable cosmos, just to clarify that. Mm-hmm. There was a beginning. The Big Bang was the beginning of that. Or if you want to go back to inflation theory, whatever, we agree on that. However, I propose that there was probably a space-time pre-Big Bang.
That's not logical. That can't be logical.
Probably unique.
Because pre is temporal and t equals 0. That's when time and space-time started. So there can't be a pre-Big Bang.
I have no problem denying t equals 0 as even a concept, as a thing. I have no problem accepting eternity.
Well, t equals 0.
You see how it became a theory that fast? That's just your word against his. It's a guess.
Stop using the word theory, please. Please, for sake of this conversation, if you're going to say something like that, I would respectfully request that you use the word guess, only because if we're talking about things like beginning of the universe, part of this conversation is going to be at least somewhat scientific, and so that word theory is going to be incredibly loaded. So if you use it, you will inevitably be using it incorrectly.
Okay, I'll use guess after you realize the only reason that scientists say theory is to get away with it.
No,
it's a guess.
No, it's an actual.
You just bit the fucking bullet again. No, that's not how that works.
It's the scientist.
Then do us a favor. Then do us a favor. If it's just a guess, then I just guess if I jump off this balcony, the theory of gravity won't drop me down. Oh wait, it will. Anyway,
wait. I don't know if Pastor Wilson, you are aware that gravity is just a theory and germs are just a theory and atomic nuclear weapons or atomic theory, that's just a theory. You're aware of that,
the
correct?
Reason why they're theories is because we didn't create this stuff, so we don't know what it actually is.
Have you cracked open a science book?
Yes, and every scientist
demonstrate you read the damn thing.
They admit it. The only reason you're not is because that's what you've based everything on.
No,
I can't own that it's not.
I spent 23 years as a Christian. My worldview is not contingent on science.
Christianity has been corrupt over the last 1800 years.
Congratulations! It's been corrupt since the Nicene Creed.
That's true.
I want to move to,
that means you weren't a part of real
corrupt.
Christianity.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
I want to move to Ross's point number 11. I found it pretty interesting. If I can just kind of encapsulate it, that anything that was created by a deity or designed by a deity or fine-tuned by a deity means that there must be a deity. And I just wanted to ask Pastor Wilson regarding design. Now, here's what I'm going to throw at you. If something was designed, because who is that? Ray Comfort? Who's the one that says, oh, you see a painting, what does that mean? Had to have a painter. You see a building, had to have a builder, you know, all that, right? Yeah. But Hawaii exists. We all agree on that. We know what created that. And it wasn't intelligent design. It was volcanoes. We see snowflakes.
Well, you just did what he just
catch a
did.
snowflake. Well, I know I'm just throwing some ideas out there. I'm not even making a determination or conclusion.
Okay.
But
go ahead.
We see snowflakes. They land on your fingertip or your tongue, and you see how intricate they are. And we know the process that froze that precipitation into that just seemingly perfect, unique shape. And there was no mind, there was no intelligent agent behind that. So does everything that is created automatically imply an intelligent agent?
Yeah.
Okay,
the
snowflakes
disagrees.
And Hawaii.
You just went to the you said there was no way for there was no intelligent design behind Hawaii.
No, I didn't say that. I just said volcanoes created Hawaii. We do know that.
So who created volcanoes?
Okay, you said who. I'm not willing to. I'm not
okay,
willing to go with
what
who.
created volcanoes?
Tectonic shifts.
Yeah, and then we
what
go
created tectonic
exactly.
shifts?
And you know where this conversation is going. We're back to T equals 0.
And by making that argument, you are back in the fallacy of a problem of infinite regress. You can't plead to infinite regress, because I can plead from infinite regress and get to a completely different deity or get to a completely different God.
I'm not listen, I'm
or
not
get to a completely different cause.
I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm at the point where there is a God. You're stuck with the God. No matter how you go around it, you're still stuck with a God.
Okay, cool. Me and you agree a God exists. I'm going to go ahead and take Spinoza's God because that one does exist. And here we are.
Yeah, you can do that.
Okay, and that doesn't get me to theism. Spinoza's God is an atheistic argument.
Deist.
It's not even deism. Spinoza's God is just the universe.
Pantheist.
You're still stuck with a God. No matter what you do, you're stuck with a God. There's no way, even with the scientific method, there's nothing that explains it. You just admitted T equals 0. You still don't know what caused it.
Yeah, but
that's
then
a big I don't
know. You can't then assert that you do.
No, I can because
Ross has something.
I can do it from God. You can't.
Ross, what do you have?
From a God.
You can't.
You're the one who's being held, not me.
Let Ross talk real quick.
I just denied that I'm appealing to an infinite regress.
No, you have to.
But a lot of these conversations go back to T equals 0 and inserting an intelligent agent as the causal as the cause of the expansion inflation is that's multiplying assumptions where they don't belong. All we know for a fact is it all came from a singularity, whether that was an intelligent agent that touched it off or not. That's a big I don't know on both sides of the equation.
That's where we're stuck at. Yeah,
we're going back to the beginning, and that's not. I mean, we can. I got no problem with that, but my arguments aren't about the beginning of everything. It's not about creation. It's not about design.
But it's a regress. It leads us there every time.
Yeah,
your first premise invokes the problem, though. For there to be a son of God, there must be a God. You're by invoking a causal chain. Your first premise invoked a causal chain. Once you've invoked a causal chain, you fall into the problem of infinite regress.
Yeah, you end there regardless.
By analogy, for there to be a bear footprint, there must necessarily been a bear at some point in time.
Well, that's not true either.
Yeah, it's still not necessarily true, because for there to be a bare footprint, there could also be a person with a
Just drawing it.
yeah.
Or
There could be a person stamping it into the ground.
Yeah, that's not
It
true.
gets you to a it gets
No. That would not be a bear footprint. Sorry,
What?
but Bigfoot.
okay. Then say a bear's
Bigfoot.
footprint. The bear has ownership over the footprint. Then it's a bear's footprint.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. For there to be
footprint comes from Bigfoot. A fake Bigfoot footprint does not come from Bigfoot.
okay. Now the problem that I'm having though is not that. So by invoking a causal chain, you are not in just that. You are not in just that committing a fallacy. It's the fact that the causal chain invokes the regress. The reason this is problematic, though, is that it uses the same tools that a theistic argument would, and it falls for the same reason.
No. All I'm using is a modus tollens deductive argument. It's valid.
But it's not sound.
That's what we're determining.
For it to be, well, hold on. For it to be valid, all of the premises would have to be true. For validity is all premises are true and consistent. Soundness is the conclusion is also true.
Not only does the premises have to be true, but the conclusion must follow from the premises.
That's what the conclusion must follow from the premises if it's sound. No, you're right. No, the conclusion has to be true for it to be sound.
Correct.
Okay. The problem, though,
it is a valid argument, just like Craig's is a valid argument. I consider Craig's argument, his moral argument, to be unsound, but it is valid.
But valid. Well, like I consider the Kalam cosmological argument valid, but I don't consider it sound, especially because of what it is attempting to invoke. It is attempting to invoke Yahweh, but it instead gets you to any of 40,000 gods.
Now,
it doesn't get you to Yahweh,
right?
Now, the pastor and I might agree on, if you want to go back to the beginning discussion, there's probably a name for the argument, but it's if premise one, if there was nothing, then there would still be nothing. There is something, so there was never nothing.
Wow.
That's loaded.
Yeah.
So claiming there is, you are a fan of Lawrence Krauss, so I would assume that you've read his book.
I have not. I'm actually not a avid reader. I have to get things from YouTube and stuff, but I try and read Greek philosophy. I've got my textbook still, stuff like that.
That's fair. So Krauss has an argument from what is it called? There's a word that he uses, and it's not the word I'm going to use simply because I can't remember it. But Krauss has an argument from quantum particles.
Yeah.
Where what we understand as nothing, scientifically, quantum particles pop in and out of that. Are you positing that there was a nothing at one point scientifically, or are you positing there was a nothing at one point philosophically?
I've watched about 4 hours of discussion. I think Krauss was involved in it. It was a Neil deGrasse Tyson discussion about nothing. Probably about 5 different panelists on it. One was a mathematician, I believe, or something like that. My understanding and definition of nothing might be drastically different than most people's. I asked a philosophy professor at my college how he defines nothing. Of course, his answer was the absence of everything, or the absence of.
I'd say the absence of anything. The absence of anything would be nothing.
So that didn't do anything for me.
That's because that's why I asked the distinction, because if you're arguing from scientific nothing, there's about 11 different definitions we can work with from scientific nothing.
I believe it is a scientific definition of nothing, as in the absence of energy.
Hold on?
Is that not one of the scientific?
When was there absolutely nothing, like a complete void of any molecular activity? No matter, no space, no time. When was there nothing?
To me, the answer is never. There was
Correct.
never nothing like that,
Because the
Because
keyword
for
is
me-
when was there
Yeah,
nothing?
the keyword is when.
Anything-
Once you've invoked when.
For me, nothing is the absence of energy, and we know scientifically that so-called what we think empty space has energy in it.
Yes, and we also know that one of the reasons there's the distinction for the cosmos is we also know that there's an entire building understanding of dark flow, which posits that there could possibly be multiple universes because we see that there's outside influence on
What?
ours.
That's a
Was in-
hypothesis, Pastor
It's a-
Wilson.
that-
That's
That's a
is
hypothesis.
hypothetical, not theoretical.
all of it is hypothetical. You guys just
No,
don't
it's-
want to own it. It's fine. though.
We can own. I can own that it's
No.
theory.
Yes, I can own that you think it's hypothesis if you say it's hypothesis and not confuse it with an actual scientific theory. But yeah,
Okay.
that's yeah.
So tell
I
me,
can
this.
accept that you think
Tell
that
me, wait. Where do people come from?
Define come from.
Here comes
Their-
another
their-
regress.
Their origin.
Define
come from
origin.
nature.
Or define
come from-
origin.
And define people.
When they first came to be.
When did they
Human
first
beings-
come?
Come from nature.
When did they first
We
come to
come-
be?
When did human beings first come to be? Okay,
Yeah.
Between 200,000 and 300,000 years ago,
As a
possibly
branching off of-
Morocco.
as a branching off of the bonobo.
Prove it.
We come from.
We
come from
already
nature.
have. We have the
No, you
transitional
haventwo
fossils from that.
No, you
About
haven't.
There's
Who
there's two
doesn't-
problems. There's two
No,
problems
you
here.
haven't.
There's two. Hold on. There's two problems here. You can claim we haven't, and you can be wrong, and that's fine. But there's two problems here. The problem number one is you've asked, prove it. First of all, that's a mathematical issue. Proving is not a scientific issue. So thank you for the category error. It's good to know that your understanding of this is about what I thought.
Mathematical equations are wrong all the
No,
time.
it's that's not how equations
Those
work.
are theories also.
That's
A
not
better
how
thing
those
to
work
say
either.
is Suris provide evidence for that.
Yeah, if you want to
and
say
at that
provide
point,
evidence
yeah.
for that, that's fine. But if you say prove it, you're talking about math, and now you have a category error, and the category error is fallacious. Don't step into a category error. It's
Yeah, no, I'm talking for layman people. You can conflate it however you want to.
I'm not
You know
conflating
what I'm
anything. I'm
saying.
giving you exactly how these work. You can look them up. It's in the
It
SEC,
sounds
it's in the Oxford
pedantic, but it's
Dictionary.
important.
It's in
important to
in
be
Plato.
precise.
Like the literature's out
So,
there for you
okay,
to read all
wait,
of this.
wait. You said it happened how long ago?
Pastor on some things.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Do you use whatever term you want? Do you believe? Do you accept that there is something necessary?
What do you mean?
For what?
Yeah, you didn't finish the question.
Something necessary
No,
for what
it's-
to happen.
Philosophical necessary, as in fundamental, eternal.
Yeah, but for what?
Necessary.
As in, it must exist. It must be. It's necessary. Fundamental, eternal, infinite.
My
You
question's still the
anything.
same. For what?
you need an outcome to ask if something's necessary for us to continue
No, no.
living. We need
Not-
oxygen and nitrogen. Oxygen and nitrogen is necessary for metabolism of a Homo sapien.
Not philosophically. If you're using the term necessary philosophically, it just means like fundamental, eternal, something that must be. That the negation of it is a contradiction.
Okay, yeah, then that's God. Yeah.
Exactly. That's what I thought. Okay. So you consider God to be something necessary, something eternal, something fundamental. Do you accept or believe that there is a designer?
Okay, God.
Correct. Okay. Do you believe that there is something a creator,
God.
a fine tuner?
God.
Okay. We agree on all those things except for God. I replace God with nature.
That's
To me-
that's fine. That's still God. How you
Nature
label
is
it is
God?
still God.
Spinoza's God, but not a God. That's an
But
atheistic
not a
concept.
God.
And
Right.
and Pastor Wilson, just so we're clear, I mean, that doesn't imply that only gets you up to an intelligent agent if we're willing to, accept all this in line with you, but it doesn't get us anywhere to the God Yahweh that had a son 2,000 years ago and all that, right?
No, yeah, I agree. I agree. With you.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
agree with you. I'm just saying that's the end point. You end at God.
Yeah.
No matter how which one you want to
You end
follow,
it-
that's up to you.
You end it
There's no
first
way to
cause.
get to atheism.
You
That's the
you
problem.
end it first cause. It never. it never necessitates God. However, I do have an argument that posits God as a beginning and still leads you to atheism. Atheism,
that's not possible.
It's very possible. Just watch. So atheism propositionally is the proposition that gods do not exist. We're talking about philosophy. We're talking about hard-strung atheism. It's the proposition that God does not exist. Okay. That rules out agnostic. That rules out lack of belief. That rules out all of that. We're sitting on hard atheist. Okay. We posit a universe created by a deity. We understand scientifically that matter and energy cannot be created nor destroyed. The amount of energy required to create this universe, let's assume that it's exactly the amount of energy this deity had. This deity, by definition, with no energy left, as we understand all beings to be, would then expire upon the creation of the universe. Let's say that what they did was give enough energy for the singularity to do what it did at the point of t = 0 at the Big Bang. Now we have a universe caused by a deity. We also have a deity who no longer exists. We have a universe with a first cause that is a deity, and you still have valid atheism. I can grant you a God as the first cause of the universe and still sit as a hard atheist. And it is still valid.
Wait. How did you sit in the atheist if you're saying that?
I think what he's trying to say is, if the creation of the universe started with an intelligent agent, but that intelligent agent necessarily had to self-annihilate to create the universe, then there is no God, and we are still here. Yeah.
Wait. Stop. But you still believe in God?
No, we don't.
You don't. I don't
believe in things that no longer exist.
The only difference that you're doing is you're not following and obeying it, but you believe in the existence of that God.
No, the God no longer exists. I don't believe in the existence of something that's
listen, for it to no longer exist, that means you have to admit that it existed in the first place. That means you're not an atheist.
No, this is just still an thought experiment.
You're still we don't accept an atheist. I don't accept this. I'm just
that's throwing it out there as a theory that I actually use. But that is a thought experiment that still leads you to atheism. Actually, that would lead you to
It doesn't lead you to atheism, but it's fine.
How many books on philosophy have you read?
Pastor, I got a question for Pastor.
It's you changed the logic of stuff just to
I didn't change the logic. The logic was
not true.
At every point.
It was
You're the one that can't even define theory.
We don't subscribe to that theory, to that hypothesis or that conjecture. We were just throwing it out there as a thought experiment. If God no longer exists.
But if you believe that that God existed at one point,
no, it was a thought experiment. I'm saying if I did, but I don't.
Yeah,
there's no reason. There's no reason.
Thought experiment.
There's no reason to inject that kind of
science of correct reasoning. So there is no different logic. Logic is the science of correct reasoning. So there is no other logic. There's no your logic and my logic.
Well, that's not true either.
That actually is true. Logic is mathematical. Propositions are defined as P. Belief would be defined as B.
Yeah, that's how you're defining it.
No, it's not. That's how logic. I have a question. Hold on. I have a question.
Pastor, you're using logic instead of the word reason. That's it.
What are the three laws? Pastor, if you have such a good grasp on logic, I am curious.
My logic comes from God.
But that's perfectly fine. Matt Slick thinks the exact. Matt Slick.
God is above all that.
Okay, well, science is a method. It's not above or below anything. First of all,
well, that's not true.
That is true. The scientific method is a methodology by definition. It comes from philosophy. Philosophy is how we construct methodologies and epistemologies, and the scientific method would fall under a methodology. You can say it's not true, but I have literally every dictionary that exists that says that I'm right, and you have your opinion, which is neat.
I have God.
But you can assert that you have God. The difference is that I have dictionaries that are demonstrable.
Science.
I have Bible. Okay, based on that logic, I have Bibles also.
Congratulations. We can take the Bible. I can take the Bible as a type of evidence. I'm willing to accept that.
So you have to take the dictionary as a type of evidence.
Yes.
You're in the same boat as me. You're not. You're not getting it. You're not gaining any ground. You just think you are because you're in a echo chamber.
I'm very glad. First of all, I'm not in an echo chamber. I actually have a lot of apologist friends who I converse with all the time.
They're not real Christians. That's so they're not able to explain to you.
I have a question. When you went to Scotland, did you find any real ones?
Why would I go to? Yeah, I don't get what you're saying.
but sir,
no true Scotsman.
Right
No,
over
that's
there.
right. I got you.
Okay.
But Suris,
Listen,
Again, you just proved the echo chamber. You just made a joke.
I didn't.
You just made a
That's not a
joke.
joke. That's not a
just
joke.
made a
I called
joke
you out
for
on the no
yourself.
true Scotsman fallacy, sir. It's one of
Exactly.
600 logical
I
fallacies.
like to think of logic
Suris,
and
why don't you think
science.
about fallacy as well?
I like to think of logic and science and mathematics as just in a strictly utilitarian sense. I don't place them on a pedestal. I don't deify the concepts. I just think of them as tools in my toolbox. If they work, they work. You know, if they don't, they don't. If they're testable, verifiable, repeatable, falsifiable, reviewed by my peers, you know, if they check out,
let's verify
just
what
tools.
happened. Let's
They're just
verify what
tools.
happened millions of years ago.
Okay,
there's about 2
we've done
dozen
that.
ways to verify dating of organic matter. There's
Go ahead,
about
tell
2
me
dozen different
one.
ways. Potassium argon, radiometric dating.
And how does
There's
that
about-
equation work?
No, it's not an equation.
It's
a
not an
process.
equation. It has to do with shelf lives.
Yeah.
Okay, break it down. Explain it.
Half-life. Oh God. Here we go.
Yeah,
let's-
see,
let's- you and I.
it's fun to just throw
Hey,
random things out there without defending it.
We're not
So
throwing.
back to the hub.
Hold on. There's a problem here. There's a problem that comes in a lot of atheist versus theist things. Okay, so the problem here, and it's a demonstrable problem, is that you could look this up yourself, and it's fine.
No,
you could
listen.
I've done a lot of listening.
We
and I've
don't
listened to a
live
lot of
in
bullshit
your
from you already.
worldview, so we don't need. It's not our job to go and investigate every single thing you've made up. You have to explain what you've made up.
Here we are. Here's the problem. Okay, we've hit the problem. Now, here's the thing. It's actually the point I was about to make. The point I was going to make was that it is not my job, once I've pointed out what has been demonstrable. I am not a geologist. I am not a scientist. I know people who are, and I will defer to them when I need to defer.
But if
to
you're
an
holding
expert.
on to it, you need to know what it is.
I'm not holding. That's not okay.
Here's kind of, let me jump in. Here's kind of the difference. To test your atheistic claim, there's nowhere we could go to work it out. There's no tool we could use to verify it.
There isn't one for yours either. You guys pretend like there is.
We're not pretending.
If
Here, I'll link
Pastor
you an
Wilson,
article.
if Pastor Wilson, you and I went to the nearest physics lab or geology lab, wherever, they actually, we got just a crash course in radiometric dating, and we brought with us something
How does
that we thought was very old.
Stop. How does radiometric dating work?
Here, no, let me finish. Let me finish.
Fine.
The Shroud of Turin. They wanted to test to see how old it really was. They got the Vatican to agree to snip 4 little pieces off of that shroud. They sent all 4 of those pieces to 4 independent, separate dating laboratories all over the world. One I know was in Switzerland, but they went all over the world, and they got within a very small time frame of each other. They all checked out to a good date, and that date was medieval. It was not. It was not. Yeah, it was like 1300s.
What is the form? What are they using to get to that conclusion?
Radiometric dating. We're telling you the method. Now,
could walk into
I
that
understand the method. What are they actually doing? What's the brain behind
I'm a
it?
dumbass. I'm a dumbass, but we can walk into that lab. We can walk into that lab.
The glass house. The glass house.
If we had the money and the time, if we had the money and the time, I could grab you. We could get on an airplane. We could meet at the nearest lab, and we could get a walkthrough, and we could see it done.
But what you're saying
is something that could happen.
You're putting faith in those people the same way
it's not
Christians put faith into pastors.
Okay,
you don't even know how it works.
Hold on. Just so you're aware, if you notice in the side chat, I've actually linked 7 articles, and I'm continuing to do so.
Tell me how it works since it's in front of you.
Will you let me finish? You can yell and scream and thrash all you want.
Go ahead.
So the first 5
about arguments. It's a discussion with the pastor about whatever the pastor wants to talk about. I have a question for everybody. Can you reject my premise 2 without defying the premise 1 of any other of the arguments?
I already did, based on a pragmatic theory.
Yeah,
of
that
knowledge.
was yeah.
Based on a pragmatic theory of knowledge, the premise 2, there is no God that we know of. If there is at least one theist who believes in a God that just so happens to be demonstrably true, by the pragmatic theory of knowledge, they would in fact know that that is true, not merely believe, and that premise 2 would be completely falsified. Unfortunately, we have no way of verifying. We have no way of verifying a deity.
That's just pulling it out of their ass. I would like to see someone.
That's why I defined. That's why I defined the theory of belief, truth, and knowledge. That's why I held contention with the word no.
Okay,
guys, we have 10 minutes. What I'd like to do, I've already gotten Suris's answer to this in a previous episode. So Ross and Pastor Wilson, I want to ask you something that we always ask our new guests. We always ask the first time they come on. So I'll start with Ross. I have to tailor this question depending on if you're a believer or non-believer. So if there were absolute undeniable evidence that Yahweh, the God of the Old and New Testament, exists, there's no more debate. He exists. He's here. How? What would you do differently in life? How would it change your life?
Cool.
Yeah.
It was a twist. I thought it was going towards like acceptance or belief.
No, we already know the debate is over. Yahweh exists.
Right.
Everything that is said about him in the Bible is true. And just how would it affect your life, and what would you do differently?
If it was the God of the Bible, the Old and New Testament, I don't think it would really change that much at all about how I live my life, just because I would not consider that God to be the claimed of the all-knowing, all-powerful, all-good God, based on what we're already assuming is the true text of the Bible. Those would be in conflict for me. It would be a God that I wouldn't want to visit. If he's all-knowing, I would love to have a sit-down with just me and him so that other people aren't complicating things. I would love that. But
that's good.
If it's not an all-knowing God, which it doesn't seem to be an all-knowing God, then I would almost want nothing to do with it. I probably would want nothing to do with it.
That's a unique answer. I have not gotten that angle on it before. That's really good. Pastor Wilson, if there were undeniable proof, it's the debate is over that somehow, some way we disprove. I know it's hard to prove it's impossible to prove a negative, but for the purposes of this thought discussion, the idea of Yahweh is gone. The debate is over. Everyone knows it. You know it. It's done. I know it's hard to think in these hypotheticals sometimes, but how would that change your life? What would you do differently?
Yeah. So first I have to respond to what he said, but
okay.
If the reason why you think God is corrupt is because you just haven't been taught the Bible, so you're not able to understand it on your own, so you're always going to get it wrong. That's why the Bible tells you can't understand the Bible on your own.
I was raised in a Christian family.
And like I tried to tell him before he talked over me, the church has been corrupted over the last 1,800 years. So for the last 1,800 years, you haven't been able to be taught Christianity the right way.
But you have?
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I said at the beginning, but I guess you weren't actually listening.
But all of 14,000 denominations think the same thing.
Exactly.
It's 15,000 denominations don't think the same thing. That's why there's 15,000 denominations. You just contradicted yourself.
That just went right over your head. I said the 15,000 denominations think the same thing, as in they all think they're right.
No, they actually don't.
Yes, they actually do. That's why there are denominations.
No, I'm an actual Christian. I know a lot of denominations that think that others are right also. So you're making a comment based on something that's not true. There's plenty of Christians that believe that every denomination is fine and that they can believe what they want to.
They're called Unitarians. But they believe that they're right in thinking that.
And they can
you still contradicted yourself, but tried to walk your way out of it.
That's what you're doing. Your glass. I have a question. How thin are the walls on your glass house?
Guys, I knew this might happen. So in the description, everybody, I put my Atheist Edge 20 commandments. They're already posted up there. So if you want to go look at them right now, but the whole purpose of this channel is to try to find common ground, build bridges. You've heard it before, have fun. So let's keep it amicable, boys. Pastor Wilson. So back to the question. We all know the debate is over for the purposes of this thought experiment. We know that Yahweh does not exist. We know that no gods exist. How would it change your life? What would you do differently?
Yeah, if we know God doesn't exist, I would just live freely and do whatever.
Would
There would be
you be more? Would you be more inclined to, I don't know, perform any type of action that you once considered immoral?
Yeah, I mean, the natural sinful nature of men are to sleep around as much as possible. That's what I would be doing, but
You'd be sleeping
without a
around, so you
God,
don't sleep around a lot now, but you would, given those circumstances.
of course, yeah, anybody,
Uh-huh.
most men would. Most men are doing it now, even with the
Right.
circumstances.
Okay, so sleeping around is,
I'm
sleeping
going to
around is
withhold
the first thing
comment.
that comes to mind. Sleeping around is the first thing. Is there anything else, or anything else you would do differently?
What about murder?
No, I wouldn't
I-
murder anybody.
Why?
I prefer
Why wouldn't you?
If there's no morality, why not?
Well, you're right. I don't know what I would do without you. You would actually have to be in that situation to really realize what you would and wouldn't
Moral
do.
nihilists are all the time, and most of them don't commit murders.
I prefer.
Yeah, no,
Pendulum.
I'm speaking for myself. I don't know. I can't give you an honest answer on that part because
Ross,
I
what did you
haven't
say?
experienced it.
So
That's at least
Pendulette's answer. Pendulette is a pretty popular atheist for the most part. His answer to that question is, I would rape and murder the same amount of people that I do currently. 0.
Exactly 0. I've heard that one. Yeah, but why?
Yeah, but that's
I mean,
not. That's probably not
if
true
there's
either.
if there's no divine command that tells you not to, what would stop you?
Yeah,
Is
that's
that
what
the
I'm saying. I
question?
can't give an honest answer about it because you would have to be in the situation to actually know what you would actually do. People can give theories on it, but I know the sleeping around thing. I know I would do, but the murder and everything else, I don't know about that.
Yeah. I've given my answer before, but in a nutshell, I would drop to my knees. I would take the A off of the name of the show. I would keep doing the YouTube channel, but from a totally different perspective.
Theist Edge.
Yep. It'd be Theist Edge. And I already know I'd be dropping to my knees immediately. I would try to come to terms with what I consider contradictions in the Bible. I would try to learn it from this new perspective. And I would probably, I would definitely commit my life to obeying his commands, because if he's real, that means hell's real. That means eternity in a lake of sulfur is real. And that scares the shit out of me. And it would be mostly out of fear of punishment, but also wanting to learn more about this new knowledge that I came about.
Isn't there a meme that says something along the lines of, if there is a hell, then scientists have already built AC to cool it down?
It's funny, but it completely throws out the entire idea of Apocalypse of Peter.
Right.
But Jim, is it okay if I give my answer real
go for
quick? Because it's only a few words.
Mm-hmm.
It would change me from an atheist to a Misotheist.
Yep. I like that term. A lot of people confuse it with anti-theist, but Misotheist is, I think, more apropos the way people mean it.
Yeah, you can have an anti-theist who believes in God.
Right.
Well, Misotheists believe in God too. Yeah.
They all do.
Yeah, but there's a difference in the way most people describe. If someone says they're an anti-theist, they usually most often mean that they're Misotheists, not necessarily anti-theists.
Yeah.
So
Whereas,
do we all agree that like alien abductees are a bit irrational?
That what are irrational?
Alien abductees, people that claim to be alien abductees.
it depends on their theory. It depends on their theory of knowledge.
Yeah, I'd have to look at their premises. It might not be irrational. And you know what? They might be right. One of them might be right, or none of them might be right.
They could all be irrational and correct, or they could all be rational and incorrect. None of those are mutually exclusive.
Yep.
But if I made the claim that I arrived here via a alien UFO or spacecraft instead of my vehicle,
Mhm.
which one would be a more rational?
Well, that's a different question
Yeah,
than an
that's different,
abductee. However, at this point, well, yes, because with an abductee, the burden of proof is a little bit different for them, because I either have to accept the premise or I don't, because with an alien abductee, it can easily be argued they can't produce the vehicle, and therefore the burden of proof shifts a little bit. With your situation, if you claim that you arrived here in one as opposed to your vehicle, I would assume that implies a level of ownership. That also implies that you would be able to produce that vehicle at that point. At that point, I can ask for a demonstration.
Right. So I'm asking for a demonstration of the ontology of God without assuming the existence of a God. Show me evidence of a God without assuming that there's a God, because the Bible is an assumption that there is a God. A son of God.
That's not
is the assumption of a God. You have
Genesis 1
it.
didn't assume a deity?
What was that?
I said Genesis 1 didn't assume a deity with a question mark at the end. That was meant to be a question, not a statement.
No, because Moses was talking directly to God when Genesis was written.
Funny thing about Moses, as of 40 years ago, historians don't agree on his existence.
I don't even consider
even the Jewish ones that want him to exist.
Yep, the ones that have a cart in the race.
Vested interest. Israel Finkelstein, I think, is the leader of that, the one that got it started, and he has a vested interest in Moses existing. And he, to his credit, he was intellectually honest enough to say, yeah, he probably didn't. He's probably complete myth.
Yeah, that's another guess.
But why even?
History is based on probabilities. Even
that's why Carrier uses Bayes' theorem. It's based on probability.
Even
analysis.
Carrier thinks there's a 33% chance that Jesus existed.
Right.
Yeah, and he admits that 1 in 26 people in Judea were named Yeshua at the time. So the probabilities, I would say the probabilities are higher than 33% based on that alone. But that's just me.
But
let's say
historical Jesus, not biblical Jesus.
Well, yes, but most biblical scholars agree on a historical Jesus, not the biblical Jesus. They agree on a historical Christus.
I don't even care, because that can also fall back to whether Socrates even existed or not.
We could have that discussion.
Yeah, that's its own. There's a discussion for that. There's a discussion for.
Right.
But here's the difference.
You don't find them relevant. I don't find either of them relevant.
Why?
Here's the difference between saying you arrived in a spaceship versus a car and saying that God created everything. They're both claims. They're both claims that require evidence. But the former doesn't affect my life. It has no consequence on my eternal salvation or my destiny, my future or whatever. So even though I'm probably going to still need a shit ton of evidence, well, I'm more apt to believe that one than the other one, because that one affects me, and I want that one. The latter, I would have to have evidence for. If you said I lost my car keys yesterday, I'm going to just tentatively accept that because it has no effect on my life. Do you see? Yeah, the difference there. Yeah.
No, I agree with Suris on that part.
It's not an extreme assertion either. It's not extraordinary to just say I've lost my car keys. But if I said I lost my unicorn horn, that's an extraordinary claim.
Both are claims. Both require, evidence. But I would
but that's
need
not
more evidence for the unicorn horn.
Wait, are you trying to equate that with Christianity?
Yeah, a God claim.
But
you have to take note. People don't believe in Christianity just because of one claim. They believe in it because of the countless evidence in the Bible, the Jews that exist, the Jews that attest to it, all the events over and over and over. If it was just one claim, I wouldn't believe it.
I do
believe in it.
At least in that we agree that most Christians, for the most part, do believe in the Bible due to a myriad of reasons, not simply a single claim.
Yeah, you would need thousands of different things to add on to your unicorn analogy to make it make sense. Equatable to Christianity.
All fall back to the assumption that there's a God that exists. You cannot accept.
But you're falling back on the assumption that there's a God that God doesn't exist.
I can accept the entire Bible is historically accurate, and all it gets me to is that the authors believed that the events were attributed to a deity.
Right.
That's all it actually gets you to.
Yes. The Bible
Wait, say that again?
not the evidence for a God.
I
Because
said
you're
if you-
assuming God.
So,
It's circular reasoning.
yeah, within the Bible. Well, when it comes to the Bible, there's 66 books, so it's not quite as circular because it is multiple books. There is a bit of corroboration there. The thing with the Bible,
the assumption that that's inspired by, or it is the word of a God.
when you invoke God there, then yes, you do become circular. The idea that the Bible proves the Bible is not circular because there's multiple books, but the idea that Bible proves God proves Bible, that becomes circular. What I was saying, Pastor, is that would you agree or disagree that in the canon version of the Bible that you read, we do not have a gospel of Jesus? We have a gospel of Mark, a gospel of Luke. Basically, we have gospels of people who wrote down what happened, not one straight from Jesus' mouth, correct?
Yeah, but are we still going from the premise that everything in it is true?
We're going from the premise that everything in it was as true as the authors could believe it to be. And at that point, all we have is that the authors believed the events happened. For instance, there's an entire argument and granted, historians don't even agree that an Exodus happened anymore. There's been a lot of data showing that wasn't necessarily the case, but that's its own conversation. The point that needs to be brought up when it comes to something like the Exodus, for instance, the idea that they were led by a pillar of smoke and a pillar of fire, depending on what time of the day they were in. Well, there's an entire theory, I think Aaron Ra, or entire hypothesis. Aaron Ra actually has it decently well constructed, that was actually essentially just a volcano. And if the volcano is far enough in the distance, then you're going to be following it in one direction no matter what anyway. All that matters is that people see it as one way. Yeah, we understand something to be a volcano. They might not have.
Yeah, but you have to remember that the first 5 books or so of the Bible is written by Moses.
The guy who historians agree that he doesn't.
No, wait, we're still on the premise that you're accepting.
We're accepting that Moses believed that that's true. Yes. All that's required for those texts to be written the way that they were. If I assume that Moses is true, let's assume that Moses was a real historical figure. Let's assume that Jesus was a real historical figure. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Let's assume that they were not written after 70 AD, and let's assume that they were written contemporarily with Jesus. Okay. What we get when we take all of that is we get that the authors believed that these things happened. We do not get that they are true. We simply get that they believed. They may or may not be true. It might be true if we accept a historical Moses. It might be true that everything that happened within the Pentateuch is true. That could be the case. But for authorship, that is not what's required.
You just made my first argument.
For there to be a word, there must be a God?
What you just got done discussing was my argument 1.
Yeah, but I didn't walk into your premise too, so I didn't step into the problems.
Correct. But even if you accept that the entire Bible is true, it only gets you to those people believing it. It doesn't get you to the existence of a God.
This is why, for instance, I'm friends with I'm friends with S.J. Thomason, or at least friendly. Whether she considers us friends, that's her business. But for anyone who's familiar with SJ, one of her favorite apologetic arguments is the argument from Martyrdom. She is a huge fan of the argument that why would the apostles have martyred themselves? Why would they have died for a lie? And the argument that I've made to her on multiple channels, live, not just like making the argument and then letting it be in the wind, but I've said it in front of her face as well, is that all that is required for you to die for a lie is to simply believe it. It could be true, it could be false. As an example, here in America, does everybody know what happened for the sinking of the Lusitania? I believe most people are. Well, the sinking of the Lusitania was an event.
Well,
it started World War I. No, yeah.
I don't know what you're doing. I don't know.
It helped. So the sinking of the Lusitania brought us into a war that we would not have otherwise stepped into. All that's required for the argument is that it brought us into a war. What war it was is irrelevant. You can look up the historicity of it and find out. The sinking of the Lusitania brought us into a war. And we had several men that went into that war and died with the that what they thought was the knowledge that they were going in to fight the enemy and avenge the Lusitania. Well, what history has shown us 50, 60 years down the road is that the United States sunk the Lusitania in order to get our troops motivated to go in. We did that ourselves, and we had people die for the lie of the sinking of the Lusitania.
Yeah, but you're the where that falls apart is Peter dying.
Where that falls apart is when the missile struck the Lusitania. That's where it falls apart.
No. Paul died seeing Jesus raised. He didn't take anybody's word for it.
Paul didn't see Jesus raised.
I said Peter. Sorry.
Yeah.
Peter.
Okay, Peter saw Jesus, and Peter claimed that he saw Jesus rise. Except what actually happened there was that Peter, if we accept the accounts as true, then Peter never saw the rising. Peter saw the empty tomb. And then a post hoc explanation was given to him by Jesus that he rose from the grave.
Even if he did see the resurrected Jesus, all we have is his testimony, his eyewitness, his testimony. He believes that he saw it. That's all. That's as far as we can get.
But no, based on his premise of dying for something just off of a lie, Peter knew it was. He didn't.
He believed it
die
was true.
Off of a lie. He actually
believed
saw
it was true. He believed it was true. He didn't see a resurrection. He saw a resurrected man and an empty tomb, but he did not witness the act of a resurrection. Even
wait. So he saw Jesus die on the cross.
Yes.
He says he saw Jesus die on the cross. Yes.
Okay. He said he saw Jesus die on the cross. Then he said he saw Jesus rise.
No.
And then he dies.
That's where you
okay.
That's where you
maybe
stop.
He didn't, but
that's where you had the issue. Who was the first person to the tomb when the stone was rolled away?
Women, but we don't know how many because it
varies between the Gospels. Yeah. It varies between the Gospels. Yeah. Okay, so we know that the first person to get there was not Peter.
Correct.
We know that the first person to be informed was not Peter. So by definition, Peter could not have been the person to see Jesus rise. If we accept that Jesus rose,
you got to finish the story.
I gave you all the relevant facts for this particular situation.
No, you left out the part where he actually showed up to the rest of
all
them.
that tells
No, I didn't. No, I didn't leave that part out. I said he saw a risen Jesus. I said he saw a risen Jesus, and he saw an empty tomb. He did not see the thing that happened to cause the empty tomb. He did not see the rising of Jesus.
Guys, this is probably... I'm going to just put a bookmark in this, and this might be a great place to start back up. Pastor Wilson, it's really been a pleasure. You're a great guest. I want to have you back. Maybe we could just pick this conversation up right where we left off. And Ross Frailey, thanks for coming on the show. That was some insightful, some good stuff to chew on. Suris, thanks for coming back on. Always a pleasure. And we're just going to go ahead and end it here. Does anyone have any final words?
I had a question for the but we get into more stuff. So
it sounds like most conversations here are can of worms conversations.
Yeah,
exactly.
But Cyrus, I'm going to check out your channel though.
Okay, that's fine.
Say it again, Ross.
If I can get some contact information for you guys on like Facebook or something, that'd be great.
Awesome. I will do that as soon as we go offline.
All
right, guys. Thanks for watching. And again, Sunday afternoon, that project that I've been working on with a very special collaborator, it'll be coming out Sunday afternoon. Be looking for it. It's an 11-minute video. It took 3 months of preparation and 60 hours.
He's a collaborator with an excellent voice.
I'm glad you saved
it. Okay, here's your hint. He's got the sexiest voice in the atheist community. So yeah, I'm super excited. Sunday afternoon. All right, guys. Thanks for watching.